This might be the most compelling story in general aviation today. We all know it's a problem. The most popular aircraft are on the verge of extinction, and there's nothing being built to replace them. Many have tried, and many have failed. It doesn't seem like anyone can consistently produce a certified bush plane. Liability, increased regulations, a small market, and lack of commercial viability have halted innovation in this space. So why do these two guys working out of a hangar in Birchwood, Alaska, have a genuine chance of successfully producing the first certified bush plane factory in decades? To understand this, we need to look at the experimental and STOL community. These pilots have innovated airplanes like the Piper Super Cub with giant flaps, ATV-style suspension, leading-edge slats, and more forward-mounted gear to allow these planes to fly slower, land on rougher strips, and brake harder. In the last 2 decades, these innovations have led to some truly amazing performance. But what if I told you that back in the early 1950s, one airplane already had all of these STOL innovations straight from the factory? The Helio Courier was designed and built with auto-deploying leading-edge slats, huge flaps, forward-leaning gear, and tough suspension. And it was certified for commercial use. And this brings us to today. 75 years later, 2 guys in Alaska are on the verge of bringing the Helio Courier back into production.
What's up, Daniel? Dude, thanks for letting us come in here and waste your time while you're on such a deadline.
Thanks for stopping by, man.
Yeah. Ready to go? Let's do it. A little harder clap.
Action.
This is Lucas and Abe, the undertakers of this valiant task, and they are on a deadline to complete their prototype by the 1st of May, 2025. They want to fly the aircraft to the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. We're here today to hear their story. What are the challenges with modernizing this old technology, and is there enough data in these 75-year-old blueprints to recreate the Helio Courier?
Why is it taking so long to build the prototype? I mean, we're starting with paper drawings that were hand-drawn in the 50s. We had to buy the type certificate and convince the previous owners to sell all the design data to us.
So we're in a U-Haul truck with all the drawings.
We were going to take everything with us.
We were a little paranoid about letting them out of our sight.
Yeah.
Right? We were like, we physically have, there's no backups for any of this stuff. They're paper drawings in a file cabinet.
Yeah.
Like if they were lost in the mail, that would be like project over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're going to physically drive these documents back to Alaska. And then COVID happened. You know, they shut the border down. We were like, we're not going to be able to get through Canada. Like we might get stuck here. So we put them on a pallet and shipped 4 filing cabinets that had 1 complete drawing set in them. Flew back to Alaska and hope they showed up. So there's 1,850 drawings, but some of those drawings contain many parts.
And some of those parts are used multiple times.
Yeah. They would put all the information on this one big, complicated assembly drawing. It's just like an exercise in information overload.
So then when you're like, okay, day 1, let's make a rib. And how many ribs do you have to make?
Hundreds, yeah.
Hundreds of different ones.
Yes.
Oh, they're all different, yeah.
Okay, you've got to cross-reference all these things, and you're looking at this, and it's...
Well, and the other thing is if you look at the drawing for the rib, it doesn't have the dimensions for the shape of this rib.
Oh yeah, that was terrifying.
So there's some dimensions for like where holes are, or like cutouts, or some clearances. There's nothing that defines this shape. So there's a note that tells you to look at the contour drawing.
That's the NACA profile for the airfoil shape.
So then we had to find this information.
This is the book that we found that has all the profile information for those ribs he was talking about.
Can you explain a NACA profile to a guy that knows nothing about any of this?
So they basically did a lot of testing on aerodynamics. They were like a precursor to NASA, I think. But they developed a whole series of wing shapes, and they all have a number that corresponds to the shape. So the Helio uses a NACA 23012. That's the airfoil for the Helio wing. So this drawing does not define this curve as a NACA 23. It just says this is a NACA 2312.
Wow, crazy.
So then we had to go in, plot the NACA profile, scale it to the size of the wing, and then section it up like, okay, the spar is here, that's going to interrupt the shape. you know, the rear spar is here, that's going to interrupt the shape, and section it off to create just the rib.
And you got to do that hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times.
That is nuts.
But also, to save time when they were doing the drawings, obviously it's very time consuming to make all these. If they made changes, a lot of times they didn't update the drawing. They would just throw a note in there that says, don't use this part, or replace this part.
So sometimes there's things shown on the drawing that are actually two different versions of the part, but they're both physically shown. But then you have to look at the notes to say, okay, if you want 120 gallon fuel, you omit this tank bay. If you want 60 gallon, you know, maybe this is just a rib. The way that it physically looks is not always
representative of what we have to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we went down and picked up the drawings, there was also a huge amount of original manufacturing jigs.
But all the jigs were...
They were sitting outside.
They'd been outside for decades.
They'd been outside for decades, so
and also,
they were very rough.
And they used whatever...
whatever they had laying around.
Yeah, so they're made with like
8-inch well casing. They all weighed, you know, 8,000 pounds.
There's going to be 250 grand to ship them up to Alaska.
Actually, refurbishing them to usable condition would be just as much work and expense as just building new ones. So this is the jig that builds the fuselage, the cabin section frame for the fuselage. A common method for building jigs is to first hand build a component and then build the jig around it to replicate it.
Yep.
The problem with that is if there's any little errors or inconsistencies in the part that you build by hand, then every part you make with the jig in the future will have those same little things that don't match exactly. And the other thing is, like, if you're welding tubing together, the jig that you make will not actually replicate that part exactly, because you're still going to get some heat distortion. Yeah. So it's like the game of telephone, right? Like every extra layer that you add, it's going to get more and more different.
And we've heard stories of, you know, when they made 15,000 J3 Cubs back in the day, they had multiple production jigs that they used. And when you were getting a part replaced, sometimes they would ask, which jig did this come out of? Because they'd all be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So one of the nice things about putting everything into CAD was we have a 3D model of the fuselage frame. So we were able to just build the jig around the model of that in SolidWorks in 3D, and then build the jig first, and then use the jig to build the part that we wanted. So that the part that comes out of it will be exactly the same every time.
And this is another reason why it's taken them 5 years for us to get to the point we are now. Because if we were just building a one-off, we would have just hand-built the fuselage and dealt with any small changes. But from a production standpoint, we needed something that was going to be the same every time, so that all the mating parts to the fuselage
so this
would always fit the same every time.
Machine fittings, you know, where the engine mount attaches, where the tail cone attaches.
All the tubes clip into these spots.
Where the wing spar carry through attaches. But now we have tons of these jigs. So we've got, you know, one for the landing gear, we've got ones for, you know, the seats. And if we do need to make an adjustment, like sometimes maybe there is enough heat distortion where something shrinks and it no longer is in tolerance.
We can accommodate that in the jig.
We can adjust it on the jig and then make that part again.
Do you have examples of when that's happened?
The wing spar carry through. Yeah. So they get welded and then heat treated to a really high heat treatment, and that shrinks the metal. So we had to make it 30 thousandths wider than it should have been.
So that when it shrank into the drawing tolerance.
How accurate is that? You can predict that shrinking?
We could not predict it. So we built one, had it heat treated, and then measured it, and then offset it by that amount, and then built the rest of them.
So, but it's the same every time. If you heat it the right way.
In that instance, it was consistent.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other variable. It's just sometimes you don't know. I mean, because like you could weld it differently. You know, the order that you weld something in is important.
That would change it, right?
Yeah. So if you welded all of one side before you move to the other side, it would be different than if you welded each corner.
Yep.
So you're putting into your manuals exactly which one to weld.
You have to have a procedure, and you got to do it consistently every time. We did get a lot of the original manufacturing tooling that was used in the old Helio factory. So we initially thought that that would be like a huge time saver, but what we eventually realized was that every single one of those rib dies was a slightly different shape, you know what I mean? Because it was made by hand in the 50s.
We crated some up and shipped them down to Washington to get 3D scanned.
That's when we really started realizing that they were all different. Because we had SolidWorks models of them at that point, and we could overlay them, and we were like, oh, these are not the same shape.
Yeah.
And then we ended up deciding, okay, we're just going to remake all the tools.
I forgot about how sad that day was.
Yeah.
I forgot. So this is an example of one of the original Helio tools. let's see if it's got a date on there, 1967. So that's what we started
It's a good year.
trying to use, but realized it was really hard to get our flat patterns to match exactly these old tools that were all done by hand. And once we got the router table, we started making our own tools on the router table, and that's a much faster process. We start with these MDF tools because this material is cheap. Once we get a tool and a flat pattern that works together, then we'll cut it out of HDP. This is about 10 times as expensive as that, but it lasts a really long time. So that's been the process to get up to this point, and you can see the bookshelf there of wing tools, and that's just a fraction of all the tools we've had to create.
Once they had overcome the first set of challenges of bringing the data into the modern age, the next big task was getting countless holes to line up as thousands of different parts came together in the physical world.
And I think there's a perception that like when you put something in CAD, that like that is reality, right? And it's like, oh, well, it's modeled and that's exactly how it is.
Perfect in the computer.
Yeah, it's like everything looks good, it's gonna fit perfect, you know, but then you like, the reality is, you know, you have to flatten that part. The metal stretches and distorts when you form it.
But also there's thousands of parts and thousands of holes, so it's easy to miss something on the drawing, make the part, realize that you made a mistake and something small needs to move, and then you're back to...
So even if you take all the right steps, even if you do everything correctly, there's a certain element of the process that involves just making the part, seeing what actually happens, and then adjusting as necessary. This is our like pile of sheet metal scrap. So like, as we pull a part out that didn't work, you know, we just throw it in the recycle bin. But I mean, these are all like, you know, these are rear spars for the wing. You know, there's many versions of them.
It's endless. Yeah.
So
it's constant.
We cut apart, test fit it, identify what doesn't line up, change it, cut it out again, toss the old one.
And then you make a trash can out of the leading edge skin.
Out of the bits of the
skin that didn't work.
Yeah. So here's an example of a rib. This is the intermediate segment. So this would be the nose, right? This would be the middle section. But we cut the part out flat.
Yeah.
So the router will drill the holes, cut the openings for the lightning flanges, and then cut the perimeter out. So then we pop this flat pattern onto the tool with some alignment holes to position it correctly. And then this will all get pressed in our forming press. And then that will form the metal over the shape of the male tool pattern.
Got it.
And then so after it presses, you know, when it comes out, it'll have the flanges and the edges.
Got one if you want to see it.
Yep.
And go squish it.
You want to squish it?
Yeah, you want?
See the process?
Can I push the button?
Yeah.
All right, so
Daniel, come
Make
give it a try.
Make a part.
There's your flat pattern. There's your tool.
So
I have to align this up
with
here.
the tool pins. They're ready to go. There you go.
So that positions everything in the
set
right
it.
spot.
Now, is this going on an actual airplane?
Yes.
What I'm making here will end up in.
Yeah.
Really?
It's going on your airplane, Daniel. We're starting building your Helio.
Wait. What? I feel
right
like
in the
I
middle.
shouldn't. Should I?
Put your hands under there. It's fine. Ocean's not here.
Anywhere in the middle?
Yeah, in the middle.
Oh shoot! Oh man! All right, we good?
Yeah, you're good. So
Is that-
squish it, 2,000 psi.
Where do I do that?
Pull that handle down.
This
there.
one?
Pull
And
down.
pull it
Can
down?
I screw it up?
No.
And then watch the gauge. You want about 2,000 psi.
Dude, I feel like something's. Do I need to be wearing a hard hat
No,
or something?
nothing bad's gonna happen.
It's totally safe. I'm just going to back up a little bit.
How many of these can you do at one
You
time?
can put a bunch under there at once.
And let go?
Yeah. Then back up.
Wow, that went quick once it touched.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There you go. There's your rib.
Dude,
I'll turn
what?
that off.
That is nuts. Yeah.
So you can pull it off the tool now.
That's pretty good, Daniel.
Yeah, nice
Did I
work.
do a good job?
Yeah, look at
Yeah,
your
you're-
lining hole,
you're
nice
decent at
90-degree brakes. This is
decent.
ready to go.
Yeah. That's
The skill involved.
That's the first piece for your Helio, Daniel.
The original way they built the Helio was with a lot of handwork and a lot of jigs fixturing everything in place. So they would make all the ribs blank, which means there's no holes in the flange where it gets riveted to the skin or the spar. And they would have jigs that would put everything in the correct position. They'd get all their layers of sheet metal together, skin, spar, ribs, whatever stiffeners, and then they would match drill it all, take it apart, clean up the holes, put it back together, and start riveting. That's really time-consuming process, air-prone. Also, that means that every Helio is going to be just a little bit different because things move just a little bit when you're drilling your holes.
You can't take a part off of one airplane and put it on another airplane because the holes are probably not going to line up.
A note we see on tons of drawings is trim to fit, which is
or as required.
Holes as required or whatever else. So,
but if you want all the holes to be there,
they have to be
right
in the right
just right.
spot. So we had to tighten up a lot of the tolerances on the drawings to get everything to line up right. You can see that the holes in the rib line up with the skin, and that was right off the router table like that. And what this allows us to do is not need any jigs. It just needs a saddle, just a place to sit because everything's located. In the old days, they would have had a jig with a steel bracket at each station holding the rib in place so that they could drill through and then rivet everything together.
But essentially in that scenario, you need the jig to positively locate every component.
Yeah.
So in this instance, the holes are locating everything relative to everything else. So all we need is a way to hold the work securely while we're...
So walk me through the, how do you assemble it?
Well, we build the spar. So we build up the spar, then we make all the individual ribs, we cleco in place, and then the next step, which we haven't done yet, is we're going to rivet the nose rib to the trailing edge rib. And then, let's see if this table works, Abe. Let's lift it up and put it in.
You want to see if it'll...
Yeah. We're going to be able to do it.
Oh, it's the... Yeah.
And yours hangs off the end.
Okay. Do they fit? Oh, look at that, like a glove.
Goodness gracious.
It's almost like somebody thought about this.
So then we would wrap the nose skin on it.
Right.
We'd rivet the nose skin up to this point. We wouldn't attach it to the spar. We'd stop right there. And then when the nose skin is on, we'd put it in those cradles, and then we'd work up the trailing edge.
Wow. There's probably 10,000 holes in the every single rivet in the airplane. Mm-hmm. It's not as simple as one piece meeting up with one other piece. There's always 4 pieces or 5 pieces. Every single hole, the process of trial and error of cutting it, forming it, test fitting it, identifying, how far out of alignment it is, and then adjusting it as needed, and then reiterating that until everything lines up.
I mean, I'm assuming you have the entire wing assembly drawn out in SolidWorks in every hole. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing that, it compensates for the thickness of the skin and all that, right?
No.
Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, it's really complicated in SolidWorks to have these skin overlaps, so we just have the skins run right into each other in SolidWorks, and that induces a little of variation also that we have to deal with. Yeah. But for a 20 thousandths overlap, it's not a big deal. Yeah. But where you have multiple skins coming together, like on this one,
now we've got 3 layers.
And so on this skin, we had to move every hole back 25 thousandths manually, and we updated our drawing.
But that's the thing, when you have all these different overlaps, your material that's on the top has to travel a longer distance. Yeah. In SolidWorks, these would all be overlapping.
And so this is an example where we had a mistake. We need to recut this with the correct number of holes for that spacing. So we'll fix that and it should line up. That one, this overlap, nothing lined up. So first thing we did is we checked the drawings. Everything matched the drawings, so that just meant that it was a result of the manufacturing operations that it didn't work like that, and we needed to move everything just enough to make it work.
Okay, so where are you at in that process on the wings right now? Are you there with wings?
We're real close.
We kind of started at the root and worked our way out. So pretty much everything out to this area right here
has been perfected.
Is pretty much good. So we're working a couple things out here, and then in the next
phase. So as we've been figuring out this wing, every time we get dialed in and locked in on a part, we'll make it for the other wing.
Yeah.
So that wing hasn't been test fit with any skins because this one already has.
So does that work? By the way, can you just mirror it and it's going to fit perfectly?
Yes.
Yeah.
At this point, they have solved most of the challenges associated with producing the airframe. But what about the engine? The original Helio Courier was a beast, partly thanks to the monster power plant, an engine that no longer exists. This could be their biggest challenge. If they can't find the perfect engine, this project is dead.
We had to find an engine because they don't make the original engine anymore.
We knew that had to be solved, but we weren't really sure how we were going to solve it. So the original engine is a Lycoming GO480. It's a gear reduction engine. It generates more horsepower than it should for its size and weight because it's running at 3,400 RPMs instead of 27, you know, so.
And then the gear reduction gives it a bunch of torque to spin a big propeller slow.
Yeah, so you get a torque multiplier from the gear. So you end up with this giant 96-inch 3-blade propeller that just generates a tremendous amount of thrust. And that really is part of the key to the performance. So we had to figure out, how do we replace that with something that is going to do the same thing.
So this is like the biggest if in this whole thing, like going into it. You've got to solve this or the whole thing fails.
Yeah, because the key is, like, in order for the Helio to be the Helio, it needs to have exceptional takeoff performance.
Yeah.
If it's got a 700-foot takeoff, somebody's going to buy a 206. I mean, that's the reality, right? Is that in order for us to continue to exist, then it has to meet that minimum performance.
Yep.
So this is what we came up with. We felt very strongly that the big propeller turning slow worked for this design, and that's what we wanted to maintain. So the challenge we had was, how do we get a direct drive engine to essentially do the same thing? What we did was we took an engine that would normally operate at 2,700 RPMs, and we optimized it to run at 2,300 or 2,400 RPMs instead. You can change the camshaft to make peak horsepower or peak torque at different RPMs. So they put a different camshaft in here that makes peak torque at a lower RPM. So at 2,300 RPMs, it makes 326 horsepower and 748 foot-pounds of torque, which is right where we needed to be to match the torque of the Geo 480 to spin the big propeller.
But we're doing this with a direct drive, and also this engine is, you know, it's a aircraft engine. It's rated for 2,700 RPM.
Yep.
We're never going to be close to that, so this thing should last a really long time.
But the caveat to that is that we're running it at 2,300 RPMs, but still full manifold pressure. So we're going to be running at 28 inches of manifold pressure, but only 2,300 RPMs. So that's super over square, which would normally generate a lot of heat.
The liquid cooling will
So
take
with the
care of that.
liquid cooled cylinders, then we don't have the heat concern. So we'll be running it over square all the time.
Has this engine in this configuration been used on another aircraft?
Never.
This is your design, essentially.
We tweaked it to work at the RPM range that we needed.
And the result is this unique configuration that we've come up with to pull that off.
Liquid cooling, again, is one of those things where it's like, air-cooled is simple. It's one less thing that can fail. But the liquid cooling allows us to do some other stuff. This has electronic ignition on it as well. And with the liquid-cooled cylinders, we're able to run different tunes for different octane gasoline. So we can run 100 low lead with a lot of timing, or we can run pump gas with a little less timing. So that gives us the advantage of hopefully being able to run pump gas.
So when you are ready to go to the Airman's show, you're going to unbolt this and just bolt it on there. And
Yeah, so it's already on the correct engine mount.
Yep.
So this engine mount will unbolt and just bolt right onto the front
And
of the
we've test fitted on there. It's been on the fuselage.
Yep.
And is that the radiator?
No, that's a radiator for a small block Chevrolet that I ordered from Jegs. That's the test stand radiator. So we had Aero Classic build us a custom aircraft radiator. That's what will go in the airplane. Try it out, man. Check. We put tractor seats on here.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
So you sit here and just blast it
Oh,
by
yeah.
air?
Oh, yeah. And just pray that the ratchet straps hold. You know, otherwise this thing is, you're drag racing this thing down the taxiway.
With
you
no
know?
brakes.
Yeah. It's mildly terrifying, and I kind of liked it.
They are almost done with the prototype. But even though this aircraft was certified and they own the type certificate, there's still a lot of work to do before they can produce a certified version. I think their chance of success is high. What do you think? Let us know in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss part 2.
I think we managed our we
managed our
had a heavy
expectations.
dose of
Yeah.
reality when we
Yeah.
started this.
Yeah.
We knew this was going to be a
We knew it was going to be a slog.
Yes.
We may have underestimated the amount. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? So like at the beginning, you know, we were trying to estimate, okay, like how long is this going to take?
Yeah, we found our way into the pit of despair pretty quick. So that's
Yeah.
we have a graph, and it starts with ignorance, where you don't even know what you're dealing with.
Sweet, sweet ignorance.
Yes.
But you got to get over that hump.
and then the
you
more you
gotta
know,
spend some time in the hole.
the pit of despair.
Yeah,
You realize
yeah.
how hard this is, how much there is to do, and then you start creeping up the other side. I think we're just
We're-
coming out of
yeah,
the pit of despair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting close.
Yeah, we're optimistic that we'll be able to pull this off before the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. It's still a big road ahead of us. So if the Helio's there at the Aviation Gathering, you'll know we did it. Otherwise,
We'll be here still working on it.
yep.
And don't forget to smash that like button. Ring the bell.